All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. For everyone online, we appreciate you joining in, and for those of you who are watching it recorded, we appreciate you watching as well. Thanks for coming out today. We know with COVID and the rental cars, it was quite a stress for people to come out to West Virginia. So we moved the event here. China's done a great job at keeping up with that. My name is Ron Bronner. For those of you who don't know me, I own Bronner Group, and we are putting on this event specifically to discuss both the aviation use of Canine and the use of Canine in other industrial or commercial uses. And we'll get into those as we move throughout the day. So thank you, everyone. And this is Joanna. She'll be taking care of the rest of the day for you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for all of our in-person and virtual participants in today's Canine Capabilities event. From the time that man and canine came to know one another, their reciprocal dependency for security has led to great strides in our evolution. Continuing from ancient sheep herders, modern-day entrepreneurs continue to harness our natural companions to solve the problems of our modern world. There are accelerate detection canines used by statewide insurance to mitigate insurance fraud in cases of suspected arson. Canine teams probe our oil pipelines daily to prevent environmental catastrophes in America's heartland. Even sweet cocker spaniels sniff barrels in Scotland to make sure that your 18-year-old Scotch is just right. I could list much more, but I know that there are others eager to talk to you. The use of canines for modern problems are endless. Our furry friend's sense of smell is more than 10,000 times that of our own, and the dog whisperers among us have applied individual ingenuity to harness that capability, reinforced by our natural companionship. These solutions are not only time-tested, they are green, utilizing only food, water, and cuddles to meet our security and imbibing needs. Intricate networks of sensors along thousands of miles of pipelines and the massive ETD and X-ray machines used to meet the compliance standards of air cargo screening use vast amounts of energy. The need for energy-consuming technology in our society will never be obsolete, but we can make smart green choices to reduce our carbon footprint. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for coming today. We will hear two presentations for canine companies presenting some pretty innovative capabilities, followed by two panel groups on the strategies and challenges of the International Civil Aviation Organization's impending June 30th deadline. And finally, a presentation by SOC on the canine applications for aviation beyond the TSA's 3P Canine program. So I'd like to introduce the Global Canine Protection Group on their presentation for COVID screening canines. Welcome back, and thank you to Brandon Freed, Executive Director of the Air Forwarders Association, and Karen Avestras, Director of Aviation Security at Unify, formerly Delta Ground Services. Thank you for participating in the panel today. The impending mandate of 100% screening for all air cargo in the U.S. goes into effect at midnight on June 30th, a little over a month away. Speaking from the respective positions of indirect air carriers and ground handling service providers at America's airports, what impact will this mandate have on your operations, and what strategies are you implementing in preparation?
I think the process really starts to do that, right? Thanks for having me, and this is certainly an interesting and very pertinent discussion, so I'm glad we're having it. This is going to be what we call a paradigm shift. Thank you. So this will be a paradigm shift in the industry. And I know that sensitive security information rules forbid us from disclosing absolute details. But the reality is that, the all cargo side of the business is going to be changing in terms of security. And so there are a lot of questions at this point in time, and not a lot of answers. And the deadline is imminent. Time is of the essence. The TSA has decided that we are, as a country, are going to abide by the International Civil Aviation Organization's recommendations. And so it's generated curiosity, uncertainty, and people are getting ready. Now, TSA's perspective has been that we've had 5 years to get ready for this, and I can't argue with that, but the devil is in the details. So right now we're collecting details, and we're trying to make sure that we do this the right way come July 1st. Unfortunately, there will be no extensions. There will be no delays. There will be I would call it a gentle enforcement, according to TSA, as we progress through it. But make no mistake about it, there will be this paradigm shift come July 1st. And we're getting ready for it.
Yep. Thank you. I think from a handler's perspective, from a service provider's perspective, there were a number of things that over the last probably year or so, since it seemed that there was some momentum coming with this 5-year deadline, we've had to do some things like just really assessing what it means to us in each individual warehouse. So in a lot of warehouses, we have a mix of passenger airlines and charter airlines. I'm sorry, not charter, freighter airlines. So we're already used to the 100% screening for the passenger side. Now you throw the freighters into the mix, and it throws it off a little bit, right? So part of the initial task is to really assess what the throughput in each air warehouse facility is, which of it's passenger versus freighter, and then how much of that freighter cargo is actually going to have to be broken down, screened, et cetera. Through now, or through the end of June, the freighter cargo has a different set of requirements from a screening perspective than the passenger does. So the burden now is going to be great. There aren't a lot of exceptions to the passenger screening at 100% for the freighter program, at least as far as we've seen. And a lot of that stuff passed through a lot more expeditiously, I would say, because there were different ways to screen the freighter cargo. So I think you have to make that initial assessment, get a really, really good grip of what kind of technology you have, where you maybe need to beef up technology. We're here talking about and talking with all of the Canine companies. I know that they've probably had 1 million phone calls now for some additional support and some additional business. But we've got to make that assessment. And then I think the second part of it is to really coordinate what that operation is going to look like, with the combination of the technology, the third-party canines, et cetera.
Thank goodness that we, as at the Air Forwarders Association and as an industry as a whole, advocated for the third-party privatized canine program. Thank goodness that is, the TSA took the bold step in making sure that canines were involved in completing the screening process, right? Because if we had to rely look, there's a lot to be said for technology, and I don't want to minimize automation's role in screening of cargo. It's important. But I think that the canines brought a whole new dimension to this, and it's an efficient one. It's cost effective, and it's reliable. And we knew this all along. And so now thank goodness it's here.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is it gives us one more option for the ugly cargo that shows up on cargo aircraft a lot of times. I mean, you get large pieces of equipment, you get oil drilling equipment, dental equipment, things like that, where your traditional X-ray unit, it may not fit, or maybe it's all metal and you're not going to get a good image. So I think that this is really a nice option. I would say, though, that the coordination for me, especially, again, multi-facilities, multi-tenant facilities, mix of freighter and passenger aircraft, I think the coordination of all of that is something that's really, really important for a couple of reasons. I mean, we wouldn't want each airline to necessarily contact each of you and have everybody showing up at different times of the day, right? Because there's things that need to be done to kind of manage the process even at the warehouse level. But I do agree with you 100%. That is I think the Canine is key to this being successful. There's going to be stuff that even Canine probably can't do, but I think that the Canine being there will reduce that a lot, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely just another piece in your toolbox.
Yeah, this is a, risk-based, multi-layered approach to security. There has to be a lot of tools. We don't rely on just one. But there are a lot of programs. And that's I'm afraid, going to create some confusion. And we're on Karen's side of the house. You have the indirect air carrier standard security program. You have the all cargo program. You got a passenger airline program. And I think it all funnels through at the airport and the Canine program, it all funnels down to the airport. And for someone in your position, Karen, I mean, there's just one more, or it could be a couple of programs coming, not just one. And so what concerns me is confusion. We've taken a very simple process in principle. We're just screening freight to make sure it doesn't have explosives. And we've managed to make it so complicated and so confusing that I just think it's probably not a benefit to security in the long term. We have to simplify this. And that's up to the TSA.
Real quick, I would agree 100% with that. Not only do we have the programs, and we found that, sometimes a definition from the domestic programs different from the definition of the same word is different in the MSP than the AOSSP, for example. So it is difficult to manage the plight of the poor service provider, trying to kind of figure all that out and then consistently be able to manage the screening process from start to finish. And with each program, because our relationship is actually with the airline, we depend on the airlines to give us guidance on how we're supposed to carry out the security responsibilities. So we will sometimes have differing interpretations of the same regulation that we also have to manage. So yeah, the consistency in the interpretation of the regulations is absolutely huge for the service providers anyway.
So it sounds like you guys are really looking for cohesive guidance.
Yeah,
would you say
it's fair?
I would say yes. I'd say that's accurate. I would say that we're looking for consistent guidance and concise guidance. And yeah, exactly. Now, again, I mean, this goes, and I point the finger to the TSA because they're the regulator here. And they, they're doing they have probably the toughest job around. They have to keep us safe all the time. And we engage the TSA consistently. But unfortunately, sometimes even they're befuddled on exactly what to tell us from a long-term perspective. We have issues. There's certain commodities that are more difficult to screen than others, that type of thing. But, I think the key to success here is this collaboration. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got to be working together. And I'm glad that TSA's provided several opportunities for us to engage with them. And, we're co-creating this policy going forward. Now, they have to implement it and they have to enforce it. But I'm glad we're doing that. But it's like, it's the old sausage discussion. You never want to go into the factory to see it made. Well, the same thing applies to air cargo security policy. You don't want to be around when it's being made. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, how is it progressing in implementing these strategies in preparation? And what are the hurdles you guys are facing aside from guidance?
I think I'll just real quick. I'll just say that the biggest hurdle we're facing right now is uncertainty and differing messaging, complexity. There's a potential notional security program now that I don't know how workable it is long term, but it's complex. It's what it is. It's kind of like, I always say, if I can't go to my next door neighbor who's not in our industry, and I can't knock on his door and explain to him what I'm doing and him understand it real fast, then we shouldn't be doing it. And that's what I would say one of the biggest concerns are. And they're unanswered questions, which, by the way, Joanne, have to be answered come July 1st. And if there's an absence of those answers, that's going to be really concerning because, the rest of the world is expecting us to be in compliance.
Well, and it just adds to the complexity of being able to deliver the product that needs to be delivered to, right? So everybody's going to make their own assumption about what those unanswered questions are supposed to be. I think the other thing, and I'm not super close to this, but I think that anyone who needed to get additional technology, I don't know that is necessarily readily available. I don't know if anybody in the audience knows, but if anybody needed X-ray units or things like that, I think that those are probably taking a little bit of time just because of the uncertainty and what's happened over the last year and a half. I don't know that anybody really thought this would even happen, so quickly as we're recovering from the pandemic and things like that. Yeah, I think everybody just waited. So,
yeah, and I would say, the same thing happened at the 9/11 Recommendations Act in 2010 when passenger screening came about. I had some members call me up a day before screening was actually the law and implemented, saying to me, "We hear the screening's about to happen. What's this all about?" So. But most people have been very engaged in this. I think that, a lot of it's regulatory language. Mm-hmm. The programs have to be able to mesh with one another. And right now, TSA has not been quick in getting that done. We're hoping that is done soon. We need to have, just as I say, I go back to the answers to vital questions that have to be addressed. And, I'm sure that we'll be able to look, we got passenger screening done. It was difficult. It was challenging. It's been expensive, resource restrictive, but, we've gotten it done. I think we can do this too, but we have to get these certain issues out of the way first. Oh, and by the way, I think that the shipper needs to be involved more. And now the shippers aren't going to have the same remedies that they had in the past, alternatives they had in the past. So I think you're going to see shippers becoming much more engaged in the screening process. And I've been told by people at TSA that applications to the Certified Cargo Screening Program have actually increased because now shippers are saying, oh, maybe we have to get involved in this and become the masters of our own fate.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry, especially when you're talking about freighter cargo again, where, you get a lot of shipper builds. You might get, 200 boxes on one pallet, and it's already built. So now what do you do? Are you going to break it down? It's really the kind of cargo that you get for freighter, especially a passenger airline freighter. So not so much the FedExes, the UPSs of the world, right? Not the small package stuff, but the stuff that's gone in the belly of a passenger airplane. Or on a regular passenger like China Air, for example. That freight, that's multiple boxes, multiple pieces. It's just big, ugly freight. And it needs to get from point A to point B. Having to break that down is going to be a cost. It's a labor cost. It's space. I don't know that a lot of warehouses are going to have the space to be able to take in a shipper-built container, break it all down, build it back up again, or screen it, build it back up again. So I think lots of logistic questions to be answered besides the regulatory stuff and the consistency on regulations.
So the CCSP, I don't mean to add, are we okay on time?
Yeah.
Right?
No, I was going to say you read my mind because my next question was going to be, aside from government, what other stakeholders, would you like to see some action from? And you went right to the shipper.
So I remember back this is 15 years ago, the CCSP was developed by a guy at are thought about by Ed Kelly at TSA. And Gary back here, there are people who remember Ed Kelly. And I remember going into Ed's office. Unfortunately, Ed passed away. But, I remember going into his office and he kind of described this program that would actually feed the security burden into the supply chain. And his vision was, I think, on the onset that we could have like 100,000 entities in this program. But I think what happened is that because there was a difference between freighter and passenger requirements, CCSP lost ground. And only a select few companies got involved in it. And so I think it started out at like 1,400. And now it was down to 800 or something. It's reduced. And so this is the shot in the arm that CCSP needed. And I think this addresses or goes to Ed's vision. That now that no one has a place of refuge, shippers are going to say, we need to control our own fate more. And this is a perfect program for this. This is what CCSP was designed for all along. It wasn't the security burden, unfortunately, shifted to the carriers. And that was not the vision of Ed Kelly at the beginning.
It's actually keep it away from the warehouse.
Yeah, it was keep it off airport.
Control in the supply chain so that it didn't all end up, in a big pile.
And the screening would be done by the people who are building the boxes or packing their own boxes, right?
Instead of having to break down, et cetera, just to build it back up again.
Yeah, and so far, I would say that CCSP has been a very successful initiative for those who are in it, for those who are involved in it. It is, and hopefully we'll see more in it because I think that's the best answer of all.
Besides our friends in the room.
So 2 months ago, people were shocked by the sight of 40-some cargo ships waiting days outside the Port of Los Angeles. But backlogs of trucks waiting to deliver air cargo at airports has been a growing problem for years. What, if any, are the chances of funding to improve the cargo side, specifically of airports, in the new infrastructure bill?
Okay, so I want to take my hat off to Gene Soroka, who runs the Port of Los Angeles. And I've been out there I've had a tour of it, and, he has just been overwhelmed with cargo out there. And you're right, 40 ships a month ago was not unusual, and it's still not unusual to see a lot of ships waiting berth at the port. What caused it? Can you point to one thing in particular? And I say probably not. You had COVID and its impact on the labor force. You had maybe people thought that they were getting enough money on unemployment. They didn't want to come to work. You have issues regarding chassis and boxes, availability of boxes. You had the Ever Given situation where that took boxes out of the supply chain. And then, of course, you have infrastructure. Roads leading to the ports and the highway systems and the truck waiting areas. And those, that's a big area. So, we now have an opportunity. We have a new president. He has a significantly aggressive infrastructure plan. They call it the jobs plan, but the reality is the infrastructure projects will create jobs. Okay. Now, is it, obviously they're coming down. He started off, at $2.2 trillion. He's come down like 500 billion now, but that's fine. And we need to invest. This country has not invested sufficiently in its highway and railroad and maritime and, of course, airport infrastructure in years. Most of these airports right now have not had significant infrastructure investment for over 40 years. And in this bill is only $25 billion for airports. That's a paltry sum when you look at things. And nothing, by the way, is focused on air cargo infrastructure. So we have lines at the airports now. We have truckers waiting 8 to 10 hours to get to cargo handling facilities. And a lot of times it's based on infrastructure. Other reasons too, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's labor at the handlers. Maybe it's efficiencies. We're not leveraging technology the way we need to do. So, I think what we need to do now is we need to engage the Biden administration and making sure that part of that money that goes to airport improvement also gets focused on air cargo and of course the seaports as well, because that's what, our nation's economic vitality depends on it. Other countries are doing this. If you go to China and you look at their road systems, you'll see why they're efficient. Because they've now granted, in China, they come to you and they knock on your door and say, you're moving today, and off you go. And, but so they have, we have restrictions here. But the point of the matter is you need that infrastructure to be competitive globally.
And Karen, so with the 100% screening mandate coming and the congestion that is already there, on the cargo side of the airports. How are people trying to prepare for that?
Well, I think we go back to the coordination, logistical coordination conversation, right? I mean, I don't know that there are a lot of initiatives to install technology necessarily, but we do have people that will sometimes work in the warehouse and kind of manage the dock flow and make sure that we're bringing people in, first out kind of a thing. I think my bigger concern, because we're used to the truck waiting times already, as they are now anyway. I don't know, they'll get worse, I suspect, because as we're breaking down freighter cargo, there may be more of a wait. But I think besides the parking areas, the warehouse space, I think, is even a bigger concern, because again, this is cargo that kind of had the express lane previously to be able to move through, because we had done some very specific security measures that we're not necessarily going to be able to do anymore. So I just see some congestion, especially in the warehouses, on the floor, at the docks, et cetera.
Yeah, and I can tell you, the pandemic has created unsurpassed cargo volumes. Online ordering and the e-commerce. I don't know whether it's ever going to change. I mean, people they like ordering things online, and so the reality is that we have to get ready for it. But Karen mentioned automation technology, and there is some very interesting automation out there that can really control these flows of trucks going in and out. And a lot of it has to do with truckers being sent in by forwarders who are getting inaccurate information on shipment status, right? Because they're saying, hey, my shipment was here. It's ready for pickup. And now I show up here and it's not ready for pickup. And, what's in the computer is not, in fact, the case. So, we see some pretty interesting cargo technology products from places like Cali Logistics and Cargo Sprint and, just a bunch of others that I think have some significant promise. Now, are they going to correct the situation? Not really. They'll help things along, but it still goes back to infrastructure, I believe.
And I think all that technology, it's an investment. So it's a matter of, again, from the handling company, sometimes there are buildings, sometimes they're the airlines buildings. We're a little restricted on what we can and can't do. But that's a significant investment, even just a cargo handling system in in 50 warehouses. It's not cheap, right? And is it more efficient? Probably. But you mentioned inaccurate information on the cargo record and things like that. We at the end of the day depend on the people that we hire, because it's kind of, the input's manual, and a lot of times, unless we're using scanners and things like that. But sometimes bad information gets in and it just kind of creates that type of a situation. So more technology, I think, would be a great answer. But there's difficulties in doing that, I think. So, and I won't speak for every handler. I'm just saying that the couple that I've worked for, you don't generally have a pocketbook that big to kind of install that type across all of your facilities. So it's a little tough.
So we started an airport congestion committee at the Air Forwarders Association, and it's picked up a lot of ground. And as a matter of fact, we administered a survey last month And we had the most responses to that survey over any other survey we've ever given, which is really incredible. It's being analyzed now, and it was pretty extensive. And this is an area that the freight forwarders are very concerned about, where, it's costing us money. And oftentimes, by the way, this is not recoverable. You can't go to your customer and say, I had to wait outside Karen's warehouse for 8 hours. Hopefully that's not the case, but because the customer's going to say, that's your problem, isn't it? That's not my problem. And so, you have to pay these drivers for waiting time. So that's obviously a big concern. But again, those who are screening their cargo at their warehouses, maybe using canines, should get a fast pass. Drop it and go. That should be the way it is. That's the design of this whole thing.
So that's the CCSF program. The
Yeah.
CCSP
Yep.
program.
So if you said, for most ground handling services, your pocketbooks aren't that big, et cetera, to implement these, very efficient, broad technology solutions. But then also mentioning the cost of having drivers just waiting in these congestions. And so has there been a comparison? So if you did that investment and spread it over the how much you're processing, and then what you're losing by having drivers there, I guess, has there been any analysis?
I think it's kind of apples and oranges.
Yeah,
It's not really-
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
It's the investment really, we think, needs to come from the airport
Infrastructure,
airport
yeah.
stuff. And they have to be able, like if you look at Atlanta, they've implemented a system down there that controls trucks. Now, granted, the forwarders and their truckers need to invest a bit as well. But we know, look, when you lose a truck driver for 8 hours, or when you have truck drivers or trucking companies that notify the freight forwarders, we're simply not going to go pick up at LAX during these times because the waits are just too long. You've got to tell a customer, I'm not going to get your boxes to you because my trucker won't go to the airport to pick up the freight because he doesn't want to wait that long. That's damaging to commerce. And we sell time for a living. That's what air freight's all about. Yeah, we get a premium for what we do, right? Otherwise, they'd be putting it on a ship. And so we need to make sure that it's as quick as possible. So yes, we can always look at investments and see whether it's worthwhile from a cost basis. But chances are the more investments that are made, the better.
Okay. Are you guys ready for Q&A?
Sure.
All right.
So, anyone here specifically? This is Jeff Kao with Global Canine Group.
Hi, good afternoon. Brandon, you had mentioned, you kind of alluded to it a couple of times, and I think it was part of just the main discussion, but with the TSA and the harmonization of programs, the vast number of programs, including the Canine program that's out there, the TSA Legacy Canine program that has different, there's different things that can happen with that as well. This is going to be more of a comment, and maybe you can comment on my comment, but we're waiting for that, that there's a 5-year roadmap. And one of the main pillars was harmonization of programs. And we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen rewrites of our program specifically. But we're just wondering, how that's kind of affecting this whole process, because it's like, potentially it's kind of like buckshot in a lot of different places, right? Where we're just all trying to figure out exactly what we're doing. And I'm not sure if there's focus or if there's any kind of real focus on that particular part of it.
So right now, Jeff, unfortunately at TSA, there's no political leadership from this administration at the agency. So what they did was the Biden administration took Administrator Pekoski and sent him over to the Department of Homeland Security to run that agency while Mayorkas was being confirmed. And so that left the TSA without any political leadership. And Our opinion at the Airfolders Association is that with every administration, you need to have someone there from the, who's been put in from the White House to determine direction. And so, we're looking for leadership that will combine these programs. But then when you have certain silos that are really against that, the legal silo is an example. It's not going to happen. It's not in their, I don't think it's in their DNA. You know what I mean? I'd like to see it happen. I'd like to see an amalgamation of these programs, but through, I've been doing this job now for 15 years. I don't think that agency is capable of getting that done. And it seems to run on its own confusion. It's its own self-fulfilling prophecy. And and believe me, I'd love to help them get these programs together and stop the confusion.
All right, so we have another question from Gary Lupinacci with WFS.
Afternoon. What's CCSF again? Yeah, I just wanted a few comments, guys. I appreciate I agree with you on the CCSP being something that's got to get resurrected, but I just want to say I think it was the airlines that killed that program because they didn't differentiate that service when it came out. They still charged for screening. They didn't dedicate the service at all. They treated it like any other cargo. A lot of facilities didn't take it from front to back as it was designed to do. It was held up. So there was really no benefit for industry to jump into that, to stay with that program, I should say. And I think that's a big reason that they jumped out. The other thing is, while I applaud and we all agree Canine is absolutely the most expeditious and probably the safest way that we're going to be screening the freighter cargo, the whole concept of making it a CCSF, I think disturbs me, frankly. That was something that we didn't agree with as far as the handling side of the business. We should have just had it should have been like X-ray, ETD, physical search. It's another method to screen cargo. But they've now created this insane program with, certificates of exchange and all sites of possession issues. And it's to your point, they've complicated this now to the point where if you could never explain to somebody that it's just a canine coming into screen cargo, it's now turned into this insane administrative exercise. So those are the two comments. But my question, I guess, really is probably for the canine people. And I know this is non-SSI, but there are commodities that are still going to be struggles. And I guess my concern is, what are we doing about those commodities? And I know I hear that the TSA will be coming out with a clarification list, I guess. In the last call I was on, I heard. But just curious where that is. And I don't know if we can get into that without getting too descriptive. So
I'll keep it general. TSA has asked us, and we complied, with a list of these, what we call difficult to screen commodities. I won't use the term unscreenable. We'll just call them difficult to screen commodities, challenging commodities. And we provide TSA with a list with the full realization that lists are only as good as what you can think of at the moment. And ultimately, there'll be items that you miss. But they know what those commodities are. I think and Jeff, you could probably, you've been around this for a while too. I think they're fully aware now of these challenges, these challenging commodities, much more so than they were 3 months ago, would you say? I think 3 months ago, I don't want to say this for certain, but I think that there was like this refound awareness, like they were just learning for the first time that these, presented issues. Now there's focus, and we are engaging them every week. We have a call on Thursday. We had a call last week. There's a lot of pressure right now on TSA. And they're good people there, and they're patriots. They want to get this done. It's not like they're shirking their responsibilities, but this is going to be very challenging for them, and we're going to keep the pressure on. We are not going to relent on this. This is one of the few times where all the stakeholders are working together in encouraging TSA to come forth with something, but pressuring them and making sure that they do. We can't go to July 1st without an answer to this.
So I think we'll save the question that was specific to the canine companies. I can kind of jump on that real quick. So Ron Bronner with Bronner Group. So Bronner Group acts with all canine companies who work in the same space, or most canine companies that work in the same space, especially the ones attending today. And one thing that these canine companies have been working on, without getting into sensitive security information, is they have been acquiring ways to expand and discussing with TSA different cargo configurations that may or may not meet a requirement and how to attack those situations. TSA has been working with canine companies here. I'm unsure of other canine companies. However, there's been pretty intricate details and discussions going on amongst TSA. And
Yeah, these alternate methods of compliance.
yes, sir.
And those are in fact being reviewed. TSA is they've assured us that they're going to have resolutions to them, but there is a bit of a curveball here. And that's that every alternative method, every amendment needs to go through review assessment. And that can take upwards of 6 months. And oftentimes the air cargo, the canine people are not in control of that review assessment process. And we've got weeks. That could take months. So that's a big concern of ours right now.
Brandon, for you, I want to ask this question, actually. I forgot all about it. What is your group saying about the SPF program? Is anyone taking up on it, or is it just a dead issue with them?
So I got to tell you, I don't know whether I can be talking about this now or not, what's SSI and what's not. But I will tell you, the TSA has come up with a notional program that they say that ultimately they're going to have a federal register notice on. It's called the Secure Packing Facility. And they came up with a first version of it and a second version. One of my industry colleagues said that the second version was the equivalent of lipstick on a pig. And I would say that I probably agree with him, and we don't agree on much. And so the reality is that I don't think it's going to be a program used by many, but I've been wrong before. My wife told me that this morning, so we'll see what happens.
So for those of you who aren't aware, online, both and here in person, the security program that TSA develops, or if they develop a security program, they do post it onto the Federal Register for notice and comment. You can scan the Federal Register and review public available information on there if you're interested to do so. So we have 2 questions online. Is there any more questions in the room? No? Okay. Lisa Albuquerque posted a question. Is the 100% screening mandate for cargo going overseas only?
Yes. International only, not domestic.
And the follow-up question is, or U.S. internal also, obviously.
So not for all cargo aircraft flying U.S. domestic routes. However, all passenger cargo still needs to be screened both domestically and internationally at 100%.
Is there any more questions? No.
I would just say, I would say to Lisa who asked the question, I would say to pull the security program, because there are specific regulations with U.S. to U.S., non-U.S. to U.S., et cetera. So if she has any questions, I would say go ahead and take a look at that guidance anyway.
Karen brings up a good point here, and that's it. You know, I've at the Air Force.
Saying you're wrong. I'm just
No, and I agree with Karen because there are specific exemptions or whatever. And you know, I live in a passenger line world, right? Everything's got to be screened all the time, and that's just the way the law is, and that's it. So, you know, people think, oh, they haven't been screening freight on all cargo aircraft. That's not totally true. There are security requirements for all cargo for freighters. We don't talk about, but it's a different type of screening, and it should be. It should be a different kind of screening. But that doesn't mean that security is absent. And I don't have to tell people in this room. I know that the integrated carriers and a lot of the freighter operators going domestic, they've got dogs in those warehouses all the time, and they're using them. So
And they use data for screening. They do lots of other things.
Yeah, they gotta
They're really
keep-
transparent.
right, they got to keep the man out of the box, which happened years ago, where some guy flew himself and jumped out of a box and said, "Look at me, I'm here." So there's still security on those planes.
Well, thank you so much for your time, guys. And we're just going to take a small break and then reconvene for the Canine panel. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Hi, welcome back. Thank you so much. Now we have gathered some certified 3P canine companies to discuss how they are getting ready to assist their air cargo counterparts in meeting this June 30th demand. We have Jeff Kale, VP of Security and Compliance at Global Canine Protection Group, Bill Chipman, Director of Operations at Constellus AM Canine, Dave Doler, Deputy Director of Canine Programs at SOC. And we have Tracy Campbell, VP of Canine Services at K2 Solutions. So we'd like to hear a little bit more from you all on what all it entails to stand up certified canine teams and deliver these services seamlessly. So starting with K2, what is the timeline for procuring canines?
And guys, sorry to interrupt, but if you could just reiterate who you're with when you first start talking, so that those online and watching the recording can keep up, because there's no video feed right now. So we're on.
Okay, I'm with K2. My name is Tracy. So I think all of the companies here, we all have that challenge, no matter if we're doing cargo or any type of looking for dogs. So as time goes on, it gets harder to find dogs and the demand is there, the supply is not there. So we at K2, we started a puppy program. I think there are several companies that are doing that. We don't breed our pointed ears. All of our dogs that we import, like our German Shepherds, Malinois, we import those. But our Labradors, we've been very successful with that, and K2 is known for our Labradors. So we started to do that, and you figure from the time we breed a mom and dad and we have puppies, it's a year or so before we have them ready to go. We also have to, with the requirements for TSA of how long the handlers have to be paired with the dogs and the training. So, it takes time. So our concern is, and I think all of us are, is trying to meet that demand when we have cargo companies that are reaching out for us, and we have to have those teams ready to go, and with the requirements of how many days they have to be paired. So it's really hard because we want to do well. I think all of us are in the business to help you. I know my boss would want us K2 to do all of it. We can't. So I think everybody up here we have to work together, like you guys had said earlier today. It's going to take all of us to be successful. But anyway, we can buy older dogs, and like I say, it's a matter of 10 or 12 weeks to imprint them, a 4 to 6 week, 8 week handler course according to the dogs have. The handlers have any training. So you figure there's several months involved in just getting a team ready to be able to provide that service that you guys or TSA is asking us to do.
So, and how do you usually go about determining how many new little puppies to bring into the world at a time?
Well, we don't only, at K2, we just don't only take care of TSA or cargo, stuff like that. So we have other requirements. We do special events, I think, like AM Canine do with, we say person born, the different things that we do. So we support sporting events. So it's kind of like as what our job looks like and how much work we have coming, how much we can anticipate that. But TSA requires that, they need lots and lots of dogs. I think they've reached out to all of us and their requirements and their medical and the stringent requirements that they have. It's very hard. So it's one of those things that we need to breed dogs as much as we can. We have to have good dogs and we have to breed them for a purpose. So right now, like we have 40 babies right now that we're training, that just were born. So it's a year or so out before we'll know if they're going to make it. So we have a puppy team that takes those dogs out every day and gets them ready to do their work. So it's just a hard thing to balance of how many dogs we need, because every day we keep a dog at our facilities, it costs us a lot of money to take care of them. We have to have round the clock care for them, medical. And I think all of us are trying to do the right thing by everybody, but it's hard to find really good dogs, and the people that have good dogs, they don't want to get rid of those dogs. And then the price of the dogs are going up, and with gas and fuel and prices. So every one of us see the increase in the different in prices, and we want to give the best price to our customers and provide that service. But we have to have good dogs. We have a lot of good trainers, but finding good dogs to do it is the problem.
Are there any genetic markers for that?
Well, I think that we try to look at the parents, the mom and dad, and we look at their history, what they've done. We try to breed that. We purpose breed the dogs. So we even actually use, K2 uses one good mother, and then we have two fathers. And so that way we know, like, say, for instance, like he's a very good dad. He produces good puppies, and I'm just a new guy at it. So we breed so that way we have the ability that we hope that we have a good litter, So we're not taking a chance on Tracy's not really that good of a guy. And so, but anyway, so we're trying everything we can do to be successful.
Great. And so the next question is for SOC. What is the approximate timeline and what is all entailed in effectively imprinting a canine on explosive odor?
So at SOC, we have a protocol for imprinting. I'd like to underscore the importance of having a good baseline or foundation, because as Tracy said, the core dog is critical. And we imprint our dogs on the protocol, and we can do that from green, and I'm making the assumption that this is a green dog that's never had any kind of training whatsoever. We can do that to being ready to be paired in 7.5 to 8 weeks.
So that's before they're ever paired with a handler?
Yes.
Next question is for Jeff at Global. What resources are required to run a handler school and the time required to turn out a certified 3P canine team once?
Well, you need your canines, you need your trainers, you need a training facility, you need location or places to for lodging at times, depending on how that all comes about. You need time. I think everybody said, it's a pretty basic. It's about an 8 to 12 week process once you get the dog that has been determined to be the dog that has a lot of good nerve strength and is can handle the rigors of these dogs go to worse places than cargo warehouses, believe it or not. But like when they're going down range, they're going somewhere where it's not very pleasant. You want to make sure that dog can handle that. And when in a cargo facility, forklifts backing up and down and doors going up and down and pallets slamming and just a lot of activity. You need to make sure that dog is going to be able to handle that part of it and not be distracted. So I think and it's an 8 to 12 week, but you've got all of those. You have to have enough instructors, right? And you have to have enough, the size of your facilities. I mean, you have to have places to train them too, and not only cargo warehouses or mock-up cargo warehouses, but other places too, outdoor things, and just a lot of land and a lot of things to do. So.
So it's all starting to sound like quite a bit of time, right? One canine team, procuring a green dog, the imprinting, the pairing, the running them through a, TSA authorized certification course. So, approximately, what are we running at here, time-wise?
Total for us, I want to say, all told, you're probably talking about 12. 12 weeks, I think, is a fair number once you get the dog. But that's about, I think, about what it takes. But then all those regulations that we get slammed on us too, the expense is quite significant. So, but we're able to do it in a pretty efficient manner, I believe.
All right. Next for Bill at Constellus AM Canine. In regards to program management, what does it take to run a decentralized nationwide program like cargo screening?
It's a great question. So I think there's three parts to that. The first part, obviously, is the team member. This program, in my experience, and I think everybody here can chime in and say they agree, is very highly regulated for a canine program, whether that's regulated by U.S. government or it's regulated by an international entity. This is very highly regulated. So that screening process for that individual handler out there, not outside of the dog, is a lot more strenuous than what it used to be. The second piece is the footprint. The majority of us here, with the exception of a couple, have primarily focused overseas. And now we're bringing our teams back home. And to get that footprint out there and that support that you need for these teams that have more responsibility with less support than they're used to in this field. And then the last thing I truly believe is the teamwork. And it's not necessarily the teamwork between me and my customer, it's also the teamwork for the canine industry as a whole. And that's something that I've seen change with this program, is you're starting to see all the canine companies come together, which is a great thing, which ultimately breeds success for all of us. Because I know me personally, during the COVID time, I've grown used to getting my package now 3 days after I order it. And I don't want that to not happen. So in order for that to happen, we all have to work together.
So going down the line, if each of you could identify a single point that you'd like to drive home for your air cargo counterparts.
I think it was mentioned earlier by a speaker here, but the need for collaboration is critical, not only between the canine companies, but collaboration between canine firms and TSA, in collaboration with canine firms and the client. That's critical.
I think that our experience that we've had, the little bit experience that we have, is that we want to, all the companies here, we want to make this as seamless transition as we can. We want to be there to help you guys. We just had a meeting with one of the freight forwarder companies, and we were talking to them, and so there's so many moving parts in trying to get that, and we want to make that such a seamless transition. So all the canine companies, we don't want to be in your way. We want to be part of your team, not apart from your team. So like I said, I think that we will be an asset to you. I think it's going to be some challenging times trying to figure out what works best with the dogs and the teams. But I think the teamwork and understanding, and so we asked TSA the other day a question, and we had one of the agents there, and he couldn't give us the answer, and he said, well, I have to ask a whole lot of people. So I think having being able to be paid, I don't know, we don't really have paid a lot of time, so I don't know what that's going to look like. So, but anyway, I think just that, I think all of us sitting up here, we want our teams to be part of your team and to make this transition as easy as we can, and make everybody much more happier and successful.
What would I say to my cargo? Okay. Yeah, obviously, we have to work together. I mean, we're not like we have to be, I have to form partnerships. We are literally going from 0 to 100 in how many days? 34 days, 35 days, something like that. That is, I don't believe everybody realizes what this is going to, I mean, what all this is going to be. I think everybody's starting to get it. I would also say too, I think everybody says, oh, there's not enough dogs out there. And I know that supply is a little bit, kind of stretched right now. But the thing that we really don't have right now is time, because it takes the time to get these dogs and these teams up and running and certified because of the the heavy regulations that we all have to go through. I think that there were teams, I think, there were items where you're talking to people, sometime last year in the fall. Hey, just get ready for this. Get ready for this is coming. This is coming. I'm sure we all had those conversations, and a lot of them have done that. There's a lot that haven't, right? There's a lot that the ones that get it, the ones that got it before were like, they were all over it, and they were like, they've either expanded or they said, okay, we need to get this going because this is what I think we're going to need. Now, and I think as everybody probably mentioned before, we're probably all getting calls every single day. And we're going to get calls every single day up until June 30th. And then I guarantee somebody's going to call it June 29th and say, hey, I need dogs tomorrow. And you're going to say, I don't know if I can do that. So, I mean, it's a very, we may have been already past that point now, because it's tough to get somebody up and running in 35 days, a team. If somebody were to come to us today, we could tell them, okay, we'll have it to you in maybe it's 60 days. I don't know. But it's a tough task, but I think if everybody should listen to us next time, I think more so. No.
So I agree with everybody here. It's time. Time is the thing, and it's educating the cargo industry that dogs aren't a widget. It's not an X-ray machine. It's not something that we can mass produce and stick on a shelf. That dog goes into a kennel. It costs money to take care of that dog. Every day that dog sits in the kennel, there's somebody taking care of it. There's somebody feeding it. There's medical costs to it. It's just not sitting on a warehouse shelf. And when we get a phone call to come do it, we just pull that dog out and go. And then on top of that, we have to follow the regulations per the program. So time is a big one. It's very big. And then education is the next one. A lot of the companies that we've spoken to, and I'm speaking on behalf of AM Canine now, they really don't understand the canine capabilities and what a canine can and can't do. They've never heard of a canine. It's very foreign to them. So it's educating them. We'll get customers that say, well, you really can't search. Yes, we can. So that's a big issue, is education, and then time. As these guys alluded to, we're 30 days away. It's almost a near impossibility to get a team out there right now, unless you've already got one.
So we're ready to open Q&A. Ron, I'll bring the mic to you.
The first question is from Brandon Freed.
Thanks, Ron. I'm Brandon Freed from the Air Forwarders Association. About a year and a half ago, in my office one day, I got a phone call from the American Kennel Club asking me, they saw that we were advocating for canine screeners in the air cargo security process. And they said that we hope that you are requiring or strongly urging your canine providers to source their dogs from the United States. Is that possible, or is it being done now? How much reliance do you have on offshore animals?
So I'll briefly touch on it and then pass it down the line here. Our experience, unfortunately, is the folks in the United States, we've bred out that hunt drive in a dog. Most dogs are now pets, and that comes down through lineage. And I'm not saying it's not possible to buy dogs, Brandon, here in the U.S. We do. We try to source locally. It's obviously cheaper for us to source locally than it is to go overseas. But that's my main take on it. I'm a firm believer that the European line is much stronger and has a much better hunt drive.
So before you go on, Dave, so this is Ron Bronner with Bronner Group, and you guys can still keep taking it down the line. One of the things that we have noticed, so Bronner Group does procure a lot of dogs, like a pretty substantial amount for different uses across the country. And what we try and do is connect these guys with people. They have their own contacts as well, but the networking capabilities here in the United States is very limited. There's a very small group of people who can breed dogs that have the health standards and capability in the United States. It's very limited, and so therefore the cost here in the U.S. With the cost of labor versus the cost of labor in certain countries where these canines are picked up in other countries, that's where the cost kind of varies substantially, and there are perfections to the system of how they prep a canine overseas, especially in Europe. If anyone disagrees with me, feel free to jump in, but there's a perfection on how they do it. Now, we've had discussions with Europeans and so on in regards to how we develop canine here, we being the gentlemen on the stage, the companies they work for, other canine companies here in the United States. And there is a substantial difference in the prepping what we call a green dog, which is dogs that are readily available and trainable here to bring them here to the United States, versus what we do, which is further their training for dual purpose dogs, so apprehension dogs, narcotics dogs, explosives, COVID-19. And I mean, there's a array of canine uses that honestly I had never even heard of, like the whiskey barrel dogs that they use in Scotland. These are all viable options, but it's very difficult to get those here in the U.S. and your cost is almost double to pick those dogs up here in the United States versus what it is overseas to pay for the import of the dog, even applying the taxes and the customs fees and all of that to it, you're still substantially cheaper. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm Dave with SOC, and I agree with Bill. The short answer to that question is no. I think that it has to be an international venture. There's going to be, if not already, an extreme shortage of single-purpose, what we call single-purpose canines for this 3P canine. I think the sheer number of the demand is going to, as someone said earlier, the prices of the dogs are going to go up, and the network, as Ron just said, is incredibly important. You have to have the international network in order to communicate the demands with the vendors overseas.
Also, like I told you guys, that K2 imports all of our German Shepherds, Malinois and stuff, but we do purchase our Labradors. We have worked closely with AKC. We have one dog in our kennel right now. We test a lot of their dogs. But anyway, as far as the pointed ears, we still go to Europe and purchase those, or not go to Europe, but we have vendors from Europe that ship the dogs to us. But Europe has difficulty with Labradors, and we even have to go out to Midwest and stuff like that to get Labradors if we purchase litters of puppies. So it's a very challenging thing to be able to continue to get good dogs. Like we have some that import that are great, but they fail medical. The medical is difficult for us, and so there's a lot of really good dogs out there, but medical reasons we can't keep them. So.
Jeff Kale from Global Canine. I don't know that there's going to be any great revelation here coming down the line here, but I think what we have tried to do is we get them where we can get them, because we all need dogs. We need them, and sometimes you might find that diamond in the rough. That's that dog that's somewhere in the Midwest, and because you're going to try to get the best of the best, but I'm learning the canine part of this. With the European locations and breeders, because they're from what I understand, they're generational, and they've been doing this for years and years and generations, and they know what we're looking for with a dog. We tell them what do we want in that dog before we even get it. And that's what we bring over, and we try to be choosy, and I think we are as much as we can, but we also need resources, and we'll get the resources from wherever we can. Also,
I think from the aspect of here in the United States. So Lisa Albuquerque brought up a question online, and I'll read it out. So the United States Marine Corps did a program previously where they sourced 600 labs from mom and pop shops here or kennels here in the United States. And Lisa was kind of discussing that. Lisa is a federal employee. And one of the things, Lisa, I would say on that is the federal government has a substantially higher budget for dogs, and the assets there readily available. Small businesses, CCSFs, authorized representatives, associations, whomever's hiring canine companies here in the United States, the cost in order to meet the general standards or rates, I would say, the dogs need to be around half the cost of what the United States government pays for a dog. And there's ways that they do that because they don't have the restrictions of the U.S. government. However, it is impossible for a company to survive based off the general cost here in the United States. If they were to just buy dogs here in the United States, it would essentially put a lot of companies out of business or set their profit margins to a negative, essentially for at least the first 3 to 5 years. So, does anybody else have anything?
Yes, sir. So I think some of the question that she had asked, K2 before my time was a big part of that contract with the Marine Corps. And we did purchase those dogs, K2 purchased those dogs, but under the contract, the government required them to be spayed and neutered. And so those dogs were taken out of the hunting lines where the guys were gun dogs, retriever guys that did all those things like that. And so a lot of those dogs that were selected for that program were dogs that were from guys that were hunters and things like that, gun dogs and things. And so there are people out there that have those, and it's just to get those numbers. And a lot of them, they love their dogs and find good dogs to become champions and all that stuff. They keep those. And there are still good, you can still buy those, but in large numbers like that. I think K2, when they did that, they went all over the United States to purchase dogs. And like Matt had said, at that time, because we were taking care of troops and we had to have dogs, money was not a problem. You could buy those dogs and you paid big money for those dogs and lots of it to get those dogs. So, and for us to be able to, as I think all of our companies, if we can save money, but we have to have quality dogs. We have to have dogs that can do that, because if we don't have the right dog out there and we fail a eval from TSA or from our red teams, things like that, if we fail those, we will cause so much problems for all of us. So we can't just put a dog out there to put a dog out there. So we have to buy quality dogs, but we've got to try to keep that price down, because if not, that price goes to you guys, then you goes to your clients, and it's just a snowball effect.
Yeah, I'd also like to emphasize the medical standards for the dogs. Each one because there isn't a specific medical standard, depends on the company, the canine company, and what it is that you would like to meet, because these dogs can be working up to 8 or 9 years perhaps. So medical is critical, and the government, one of the government contracts and government services that we have currently is for an embassy overseas, and those particular dogs have an enormously high medical standard because the government demands that. And this may be an opportunity to procure dogs that don't have quite that standard but are still high. So it's something I just want to get across.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Ron said there about the 600 dogs in the Marine Corps. I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate, but our largest competitor to buy dogs is not any of these gentlemen sitting up here on this panel. It's the U.S. government. They buy more dogs probably than all of us put together, and they set that price point. So going back to what Ron said, they have an unlimited budget where we don't, and that cost gets passed on to you guys. So they are the number one competitor for us to purchase dogs, and I've literally been turned away by vendors that said, nope, these dogs are already earmarked for somebody who's going to pay a higher price.
Do we have any other questions in the audience? Karen?
All right, this is Karen Avestris with Worldwide Flight Services. Oh, I'm sorry, DGS, sorry.
That's okay. Just a quick question. So with us about 30 days out for the freighter screening, do you guys have classes that are currently in session so that once we get to that July 1st point or June 30th point, we'll have some additional teams, or the teams that you have now are where we're going to start with July 1st?
I don't think we've caught our breath in probably 4 months on our side, and I'm sure everybody else is the same. You know, we've got 30 to 50 students coming through our classes every week, and it's just a continually rotating basis. But the short answer is we're trying to lean forward as much as financially viable for us, because this is still a business. We're still in business to make money. So we can lean forward to an extent, but without the customer base, it's really hard to put that upfront investment in, because it's a very large investment, not only through the purchase of the dog, the training of the dog, the housing of the personnel on the site, the feeding of them, you know, all that rolls up into an overall price point. So it's how much can we lean forward, and how much do we want to lean forward as a company?
Dave with SOC. The position that we've taken, to answer your question, is that we have 40 canines that are completely trained on all the explosive odors. And I'd like to take the opportunity to mention that TSA has a certain number of explosive odors that they require the dogs to be trained to. And we believe that we're going to up that. We have our dogs trained on 32 to 33 explosive odors. We think it's important because we need to face it that the bad guys are not going to use just 9 odors. So, you know, that's what we've done. We've trained our dogs on 33 explosive odors, and we have 40 ready to go. So when that opportunity presents itself, we can pair them up with handlers and complete the training.
So K2 is the same way. We don't have near as many as the companies here. We have teams across the United States that we have currently certifications that we've scheduled to certify those teams. So what we're trying to do is we have stand-up teams that we can send. One of our concerns is the site requirements that are going to happen. That's the thing that we're kind of concerned about. Some of the places don't have those requirements, but we will have teams that are certified. The problem is that if they're not credentialed to be able to get on those facilities, we can't wait for the last minute. So when I've looked at some of the different airports and things like that, and some of the requirements there's just so many different requirements in different places that you have to be there. You don't have to be. Some of what you, ma'am, you know, as many years you've done it, so you know. But that's one of our concerns. But we do have teams that we have available that we can send as stand-up teams till we can get those teams that are in those areas. And I think most of us are trying to have teams close by to you to cut down on our costs. That, you know, because some of this is not going to be full-time work. Some of it is. And so we have to, when we're trying to hire employees to do that, where they're saying how many hours of this is. And so those are big questions that we don't know. So all of those answers that we have up front will help, I think, everyone sitting up here of how we're going to, you know, how to answer those questions. But yes, ma'am, I think as far as we have teams that we will deploy in those areas. It's just the badge and requirements is a concern for us.
We have teams that are, you know, probably rotating, you know, they're staggered, the classes are staggered, you know, and again, that's another thing, you know, quality instructors and, you know, making sure that we have enough of those, but we have classes that are going on simultaneously in different phases. So they're staggered through, you know, at least through June 30th and beyond even. So, I mean, right now, because there is such a, you know, the demand is very high. It's, you know, we are, you know, we're rolling teams out, and it depends on where we're going to. I mean, it depends on the locations too, because, you know, then it's going to take some time, but that's a great point there, that Tracy just made about badging. It's a huge issue. We can't get a badge. You can't get you get a badge and a custom seal. There's another, I go back to the question you asked me earlier. that's a huge deal right there. I mean, we've all gone through the process. We know the process that we have to go through. However, sometimes you can't even start that process until that person's actually in that location. So that's a huge, that's a big thing, and that's part of that time element that we were talking about too. But yes, but Karen, to answer your question, yes, we've got teams kind of rolling through all the time.
Next question is from Brandon Freed.
So let's talk about the gorilla in the room, the 800-pound gorilla. You're all now regulated by the Transportation Security Administration for this third-party canine program. What do you think about it right now? What do you think, what do you like, and what are some of the challenges, without going into SSI, but what would you like to see changed, and what do you like about it? Start off with Jeff.
It's a family show, right? So, okay. It's Jeff Kale from Global. What would we like to see changed? We would like to see some. We know that when the program came out, it was done. I won't say it was done in a hurry, but it was done it was put together. I think a little quicker than they wanted to before they rolled it out. But I think the administrator Pekoski had a very particular date. There's going to be something's going to happen before 31 December of 2018, right? There's going to be noses on boxes by that time. And so I think they put that together a little quicker. So there's some things that we've identified, and I think we probably all have, maybe not, maybe independently, but we could compare notes and look at the program and go, maybe this needs to change and this needs to be updated. Why are we doing this? And when we've been waiting for a rewrite, so to speak. I mean, for the last 2.5 years. So I think we've been waiting more or less for that for the last 2 years, because obviously you got to give it some time to poke holes in it and to see what the problem is. And as we go along, we that's the biggest, that to me is what we need, and harmonization of all of the other programs that, as we mentioned before, to make sure that we're all singing from the same page, because the AOSSP, the MSP, the ACISP, the CCSSSP, and the CCSF-K9, or the CCSP-K9 too. So they all need to be kind of in lockstep, and that's a big deal right there.
So we've had the opportunity to work with our inspectors that we've had, and so those guys have been really good to us. They've been honest with us. The only thing is a lot of questions we ask them, because it's new to K2, is they don't have a lot of answers, and you can't get an answer, and it's a long process. So some of the clients that have reached out to us, they've asked us questions, and it's questions that we can't answer to the companies, and so that's our thing, and we kind of feel like we look kind of like we don't know what we're doing, and so maybe we don't, but we're trying. So that was, I think, the biggest thing is when we ask questions, we haven't been able to get a straight answer. So I think that's our biggest concern.
The two things I believe are, as Jeff said, the revision, that needs to come. It needs to come out as soon as possible. We continue to hear that it'll be out soon, but it hasn't been forthcoming. The second is interpretation of the security program. We have an excellent person that's at TSA that answers the questions as best we can get them answered, but it's not a consistent interpretation because it's a new program, I believe. Everyone needs to be on the same page, and when you have different interpretations, it causes issues.
Yeah, so again, no revelations at the end here, but I think the big one is let's get this program refined. It's just like anything we do in industry. We start out with a baseline standard operating procedure, and anybody knows that you review that on a semi-annual, annual, quarterly basis, whatever you decide you want to do. That has not been done on this program. And some of those things in there, as canine professionals, we all know were mistakes. So if we all know they were mistakes, let's just push it through. So that's the big issue, I think, on our side. The other issue too is the interpretation on the ground level. And that's getting better. That's gotten a lot better. But in the beginning, it was kind of tough. You know, one location would say one thing, another location would say another thing. So I think TSA has done a good job of addressing that. And I really hope they do a good job of getting this program revised and out there.
I think it goes to what you were saying earlier, Brandon, in the other panel about all these amendments, you know, and so as to, you know, why should each individual company, when they have the same problem with the regulation, each individually have to submit amendment requests?
Yeah, and it also sounds to me that TSA needs to hold another industry day, some type of a meeting. It was held, you know, a year or so ago. We need to do that again to answer these questions and to, you know, make sure everyone's on the same page. Those meetings are usually very valuable, and we're going to urge them to do it.
So like the other day, we had a certification and one of our dogs went into heat. One of our females went into heat. So one of the requirements is we have to rotate dogs during the certification. So our evaluator reached out to TSA and said, can we run her last? And they told us, no, we should have spayed her. And so anyway, we had to have a diaper. We had to put a diaper on the dog. But anyway, it just causes like things like that. Like our inspector said, I mean, the evaluator for us had to reach out to TSA. And so we had to run this female with the boys. And it was rough. And it's just things like that it's kind of, we kind of have those rules that we have to follow. And so I don't know, everybody in this room knows that when, you know, running a boy behind a girl is in heat, it's just difficult. So it's things like that is stressful for us. And I know the guys that have done it much longer than us that are doing that is even worse.
Hey,
Yes,
Tracy,
sir.
can you explain for those who aren't canine people, why, but just be cautious not to transition into any SSI, but why did that cause a problem for those who don't understand detection work?
Yeah, so what happens is we have certain areas that they have to screen and stuff. So then we rotate the dogs so the dogs aren't following each other. We run the best dog first or whatever like that, you know, because when the dog has a final response, you know, the other dogs kind of follow that. And so at the Canine Verification Centers where I really saw that probably the best in the world, because where we work, we don't have it like a hospital. We all work and dogs are used to odor and everything like that. But anyway, when a young female is in heat, you have a boy going behind him and he just wants to follow her. He's not interested in working. I think it turns his nose is not looking for nothing else but that young lady. So that's why it's such a difficult problem. And all of us in this room that are here, it's so hard, but they wouldn't allow us to. They said we should have spayed her. But, you know, it's just things like that is stressful for us, I think, all the companies.
And then that throws another monkey wrench into it because people have worked with dogs in the canine world a lot longer. If that female gets spayed, now how long is she going to be out? Right? You're talking about 2 weeks. Is that fair to say? 2, maybe longer? Or they might, I mean, with a cone on, they're not going to be able to do the things, and then conditioning becomes an issue. And then, I mean, there's a lot of things that go along with that. But for someone to come and say that, it's silly.
It also goes to the greater issue of taking a good quality detection female out of the bloodlines. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Next up, we're going to thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you very much. Okay. So next up, we're going to have SOC do their presentation on Beyond 3P Canine, canine applications and aviation beyond the cargo screening program. So really good information and nice back and forth. Well, thank you everybody for following all along with us. And we're so happy that you guys could come out. Thank you for understanding the last minute shifting, et cetera, as we navigate our way through this recovery. And thank you so much for coming. and have a lovely, safe ride home.
All right. So for everyone online who's watching this afterwards on recorded, if you could share this video, especially if it affects you in the aviation industry or in the canine industry, share it with your general canine partners or associated companies as well, because we really want to get the word out, not just about the aviation industry and the effects that canines have, but also in the general commercial industry and the capabilities that canines have to make America safer. Ranging from person-born to person detection to COVID-19. There's such a large market for canine out there, not as a sale, but as a capability. We want this to get out to the general public as well as the commercial and industrial industries. But thanks everyone for joining in today, both here in person and online. And thank you, Joanna, for setting all of this up for us here, and everyone who's participated.